We're live.
Excellent. Hello, world. This is the Interpretives Temple. Although we have a small crew tonight, it's actually just the four of us, but we're going to be talking about a topic of interest to really all mojos and definitely to all interpretives. And that is about creative expression. And there's a project that Ben is working on that we're going to be discussing a bit. In fact, we were discussing it before we came on camera and kind of talk about how that works and so forth. And then we'll spend most of the time, the remainder of the time, talking about what Starglow has brought for us today, which is a topic that relates to all mojos and how their powers work, the different hierarchies. I'll let her get it more into it. All right, so introductions, and we'll get started. I am Naiji Coach.
I'm Naiji Mitchell.
I'm Naiji Ben.
And Nija Starglow.
Excellent. So with Ben, basically he wanted something to establish a stronger connection with the spirits, and so we've been working on some creative expression. And the basic concept is that you take works, can be any kind of works, visual or verbal or textual, but they move you with the truth of them, the beauty of them, the combination of the two. And so artists throughout history have done this process, but really it works for scientists and really any field at all where you are moved by something that you kind of feel you want to be a part of. It might be greater than you right then. You take things that move you the most and you start being able to recite them, to do performances of them. If it's science, you'd be able to perform certain experiments. If it's art, certain kinds of artistic expression. But either way, you perform these pieces, you're like, wow, that's like really cool. Then over time, you want to alter these so that they are more your own. And then next stage after that is that you'll want to do things from beginning. You want to try creative expression from a blank canvas. Mm-hmm. Okay, so from there, that kind of high level, but now we'll jump back where we were talking, and Ben was saying, the topic had turned to you need to recite or to at least somehow embody the words in order for it to really take hold in a way that's greater than just studying other ways, which is why it used to be a part of a lot of curriculums, but it's fallen out of favor. And there is some reason to it, and it's because as an artist, you need to cover certain other pieces before you can learn your own. And when you cover things, there is some memorization in covering. Ben.
Yeah, and I was just mentioning, I used to take part in an activity called forensics. And it's not the kind of forensics where you analyze fingerprints and such. It's a speaking activity where there are many different events, like 20 different possible events you can take part of, and there's things from giving more like political type speeches, but there's also stuff that's much more creative. There is, for example, there's poetry. There's I believe a different kind of event where it's more like it's prose. It's like it's more of like an artistic speech, and I believe there's storytelling, and I believe there's drama, and there's acting and things like that. And it's really interesting because that sounds a lot like what was more standardly in a lot of our curriculums in the past. Where you would actually, have to take part in something, where you are something, involved in drama, something involved in poetry, or something of that matter. And it sounds like a lot of what is done in that activity is what the kind of thing that I'll be doing, because when you first start out, you always start with, or most of the time, you just start with just reciting it, making sure you memorize it, and that ends up feeling really good because you're actually bringing that out and actually are able to do it. That alone as power, and just doing that in front of other people is where people start and ends up being a benefit to them. And then you just start adding things, changing things to how you were doing them, and then suddenly it becomes more your own thing, because a lot of the competition aspect is that it your own, actually making it your own piece, and that is how people actually win. So I found that really interesting. That feels a lot like the same process.
This principle applies to anything you can think of. When you basically have to develop your truth voice, you got to find something you believe is true, but somehow it's not being heard, and you're gonna express it.
It's even been taken. I mean, we've taken the literary and the poetry and that kind of creative memorization and speech out of our curriculum these days, which I think is a horrible shame. But it's even in the sciences. You memorize a geometry proof in the first geometries before you learn to create your own proofs. You memorize the standard proofs. You cover the pieces that other minds have covered. That's how you grow into.
Yeah, it's funny. Whenever I'm doing homework, I always wonder, like, I always like have a sense. I do have a sense of power while I'm doing it. Of course, a lot of it can be significantly more boring because, like, what I'm studying in school often isn't what I'm most interested in. But I do note there's a certain power that I have as I'm doing the homework problems. I do note that when I'm presenting it, that also there's an increase in the connection I feel to the work that I did.
Yeah, yeah, and sharing it with others increases that power exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
I know, for example, like something I've seen Mitchell do a lot, and also Demas very well, is, well, first I'll say this principle that kind of you allude to, Starglow, which is that why you need to do that, the memorizing, the covering, and it's because what you're doing is learning a language. And learning languages is challenging, but it's so powerful. It's what really separates us so much from other species, is our command of language, both cultural and technological. So, for example, like Mitchell and Demas, is there are people who actually have read, I'm sure, a lot of the books they have on logic. But they don't have the same command. You see them when they're actually discoursing and debating, they do not have it internalized. And there is a point where you have to be able to say, what is a straw man fallacy? And you can, like, say what it is. Like, that. And that allows you to just use it with just so much more faculty than, like, I studied it. You can one thing I learned, like,
that's a really good point.
I study stuff for like 10 years and sucked at it. You can study something for a very long time and suck. You need something that makes you have to get good. Like, you know what I mean? And then if you do, it gets much better. Like, for example, debate. If you have to use it, and you'll realize, like, I need this.
Like, that makes you, like, actually doing it and actually, actually arguing with another person, actually trying to get, as good as you possibly can be and challenging yourself that way, that's, like, so powerful to your skill in that activity. Because otherwise, like, okay, I can read political articles on the internet and have my own opinion, but that doesn't necessarily mean my reasoning is good. That doesn't mean I know what I'm talking about.
See, bro, there's actually two things here. One is fluency. The other is completeness. Mm-hmm. Again, Mitchell and Demas do a great job when they actually are explaining people things, and also sometimes having to debate with them, which is, one, their use of logic just flows in and out as needed because it's actually on tap. It's part of them. The other one is this. A lot of people actually start talking about logical fallacies, but they really don't know that much about them. So besides the fact that they don't really necessarily have the greatest command of the one they're mentioning, once you open up the subject of logical fallacies, that's a whole language. That's a whole way of thinking. And so unless you have unpacked your understanding of it, you know what I mean? When you unpack it and look at it and then put it back inside, you're much more fluent. And you don't make mistakes. But when you actually don't have that, people tend to get a bit myopic on any kind of thing they're debating, and often their logic gets a little shoddy unless they actually have a good, I'd say, a model of logical thinking to work with. But that takes internalizing. Do you mind? I'd actually like to hear Mitchell back to Starglow. Well, just saying, Demas, for example, that's something you guys deal with quite a bit, is people will debate with you, and the subject, for example, logical fallacies, which is a kind of mental language, it often comes up, and often not even by you. They'll challenge, very common, I've seen it, they'll actually challenge Mitchell and Demas on logical fallacies, but they actually don't know what they're doing. And then Demas and Mitchell have to explain back to them, no, this is actually how.
Yeah, because like you can read a description of what a logical fallacy is and just associate it with something just because it kind of looks like it is, but that doesn't necessarily mean you really understand what makes it a logical fallacy.
What do you mean? Eventually it goes beyond the memorization. Like when I'm looking at an argument, I don't really generally run down a list of logical fallacies in my head. I can usually look at it and just, like, the fallacy, if there is one, I can kind of just pull it out.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, like, like people seem to think that like because I think like this is kind of on tangent, but I think the concept of a logical fallacy makes people feel like really insecure, like oh I made a fallacy, I'm like I should be on trial, but it really I mean it's just like it's like a rhetorical and a logical error, it's like a logical error in what you said, sometimes they're unintentional, sometimes like your logic was fine, but you accidentally misspoke and you wrote it to mean something that wasn't. There's a lot of ways that what you say could be illogical, and there could be an error there. But in any case, we all make mistakes, and we have to own up to them.
Definitely. I guess a Mitchell, question for you is because myself, I also do not enjoy memorizing, I never have, but I like to have a good command of principles. One thing that kind of happens naturally with me, which is where a lot of repetition comes from, without necessarily intend, is, say, for example, like logic. When I was, back in the day when I was actually playing around with that, is I would engage in discussions and I would note when, like, wait a minute, I think there was a logical fallacy there or something, and I didn't quite have it, or didn't understand it, or fast enough. I would then go look it up again.
Sure.
I didn't like the fact that I'm like, ooh, I'm almost positive I could have zied them there, but I did not have it good enough. And
you can definitely make it more efficient by like looking things up, memorizing things. I do look up stuff like that all the time, and obviously I do just on my own time. I read philosophy and mathematics all the time, so I just try and kind of be in that headspace. But if it's like there's this great website, it's actually a TV tropes website, ironically, but it has this great list of logical fallacies that's very, very deep and broad. And sometimes, there's like general categories, but then there's like really like little specific ones that get at things that maybe a broader category wouldn't get it as succinctly or as exactly. And so sometimes I might have like a hint that there's something like that, but not necessarily know what it is right away. And afterwards I go look it up and I'm like, oh, that's the thing. And then next time it comes around, I just have like a phrase that's a lot more efficient at dealing with that.
Definitely. So there's two ways of doing it. One is what Mitchell's talking about, which comes up just that you need it. You're getting on some kind of mat in life, and those elements keep reoccurring. So if you have a choice, get off the mat, stay on the mat and suck, or stay on the mat and get better. And so staying on the mat and getting better generally means you'll have to keep revisiting certain things that keep coming up a lot in your toolkit belt. But another element also is the one you're feeling a lot probably first now, Ben, especially being new to this, is creating a conversation space. There are ways to do that, but if you have a new idea, things that people don't really necessarily know about or agree with, let's say it's new or controversial, you'll need a way to introduce it. And it'll naturally happen. Every human does this. But as Najee, for example, you have a number of reasons to do it. You'll have to go, I'm imagining saying that to someone. And if you can just vaguely go, oh, she'll say this about the soda, and then I'll bring up the thing about the movie, and then blah, blah. Okay, fine. And that's all you need. And that's fine. It's energy efficient. But as what you're saying gets more nuanced, gets more complicated, gets more high stakes, right, you want to think about it more. Well, if Mom says this, then this might happen. I better say this first. And I better use these words. You start getting more like, I'll need to really set this scene on this topic. I have to make this topic come up, and then I've got to shepherd as best I can. That process will naturally, as like myself, a lot of times I'll do repetition, quote unquote, but not really, because I'm just sounding off. But if you sound off, you kind of notice you're making the same points over and over again. But by the 1,000th time you said them, you're better. It's a lot more smooth and succinct. But you have to start somewhere first, and covering things lets you get your voice in the water.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know. I've just been thinking through it like a lot and trying to work out in my head. But I think it's all clear now, and I'll be able to present it.
I'll tell you a very simple one that is used throughout time. And again, this used to be a big part of curriculums around the world. And I think it fell off for a variety of reasons that maybe wasn't seen as being like technically helpful to like the workforce of the country. And then perhaps was seen as too much of indoctrination. But actually, if you choose it of your own will, it's super powerful. And that's quotations. It's one of the simplest, shortest things to memorize, usually very pithy. If few sentences, and they usually encapsulate some kind of thought, process, belief.
Really good principle. Yeah.
So it's very effective to kind of like start getting your ideas out and to say those words like, you know what I mean? Einstein said that, and I believe that. So I like saying that phrase. That's a cool phrase.
I used to love quotations. I can
And
tell
it's
a lot.
like, as far as being exposed, in that you can say, well, Einstein said, blah, 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 blah. Just, trust me. In the village of humans, that's cool. You can ask Starglow, Nijai, if you can actually note in a conversation that quotation, the meaning of it would be appropriate. You're just like, you know what Einstein said in that, blah, 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 and that's actually appropriate to that thing. That's so boss.
I did some of that. Like when I was in forensics, I did the more kind of I did extemporaneous speeches about stuff related to politics, in foreign policy, in foreign affairs and such. But at the beginning of every speech, I would generally use like some famous quotation, to kind of set things off, and then at the end, I would tie things together. That was pretty cool how I did that. I wasn't like the best at that activity because like I would get dinged a little bit because like my speech patterns weren't very like consistent. It wasn't like Vi where like I could just reference something immediately. And I would often speak about things a little bit too less specifically than the person receiving would like me to. But I did get a lot out of that part of it.
Just that's very important to note. That's the difference between Nye and Vi, and that is the way it's supposed to work for Nye. Like what'll happen is this is natural. He'll actually learn the quotation, and you'll get to work. This is the critical moment here. Mm-hmm. You're going to use the quotation at the right moment, and it's going to have power. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Next, you naturally don't like to memorize stuff, so it's going to fade. But what won't fade is your belief in that. You believe what those words said. Next won't fade. You liked doing that. You liked that those words so succinctly and powerfully made the point that needed to be made. Number 3, you actually don't need to recite words. You could just make them up on the spot. If you believe that, but now you're addicted. You're like, I like saying, this is natural law's opinion on this subject, as spoken through me, its instrument. That's just addictive. So once you're like, I like doing that, you need to recite some stuff just to get the flow of that. But after time, like myself, I don't recite shit. I don't quote anyone else. But I've done that so much in my life that I just like, there's the answer on that. But you get that voice where you're like, and I pronounce this. that's my opinion on that. And it's very important to have to realize that you're really strong on that and need to do that. That makes everything go for you.
It's actually one of the reasons why Shakespeare's been used in that bardic tradition for memorization so often, because he has that command of human interaction. Shakespeare, that's one of his genius, the genius pieces of him, that he had the nuance between what people do and how people are and what makes people motivate. One of the things that learning and memorizing literature specifically, and the genre of literature where they actually go into motivations and intent, is so that you can either with G understand the ritual of how humans interact and what motivates them, and thus how you can motivate them to go the direction you want to do as a directive G user, or as a Z user. For Nijai, it's to understand the system for how people work together, because the Jai and the Z being unaware, we don't always get the specific interaction, but we get the structure of the system, and we can build it from there. That's why Shakespeare has been like that for humans since Shakespeare began writing plays. So that's why we memorize that.
True, but also for the Nijai, being a Jai mojo is probably, in say, the artistic process, a lot of times that the Jai is probably what may even be more of a factor initially. And that is that kind of the counterpoint to the G, that tells you the words. you'll also see that the Jai, they will actually have certain reactions to certain motifs.
Right. And that reaction is what gets
They correspond with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Very, very cool.
And that and like the bardic iambic pentameter that is written for so much of that tradition, the bardic tradition. That is how Naiji speak. That is how that syncopated G rhythm is.
Well, the iambic pentameter is actually a set of a structure.
Right.
And it relates to kind of a beat, but what Starglow is saying is correct. Is naturally you want to give the words power, and one of the things that gives words power, besides that they're true, that's the most important. Next, you believe it. That's the next most important. But then on the delivery, if you can give some warmth and so forth, that helps. But a critical element that will just happen naturally is words sound better when they roll to a rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to worry about this, Ben. If you just say the words over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, over and over and
They're
over,
going to roll to the rhythm.
they'll start rolling. In fact, one thing kind of happens.
You can't not do that.
One thing
As a Naiji, you can't not do that.
Yeah.
You'll probably find as you memorize stuff that actually, in order to memorize it, Sam at the store and so-and-so did this and blah, 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 you kind of give it a little rhythm just so memorizing is not as boring. You know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. You just start doing this because it just makes it easy to memorize it. And also, when you say it to people, it's just more interesting, but it just happens naturally. But anyway, is there anything we want to talk about this more? Because I do want to spend some time.
Yeah, I think we should definitely get to Starglow. I actually feel kind of bad. She only has like
it was very good
45
conversation.
minutes of. Yeah.
I mean, the tower's through anyway, but it's fine.
Indeed, but we do want to get to a good interpret's topic, and so I'll hand over to Starglow for that.
Yeah, so there were a couple of things I want to explore, and I don't know if we're going to have all that much time for the bigger topic. What do you think, Coach, about doing a little bit of the keening as a separate topic then tonight? Because that may end up being a little shorter if we can do that in an interpretive way.
I would prefer doing another time, and the reason is I think as a group here we can discuss where all the powers fall. When it gets into keening, that's very specific, and I can kind of just I can just say the stuff that's there now that's already out there in the literature. But I would really want to have, say, Shailene or Demas here to give
personal explanations. Okay.
Explanation of that.
Okay.
But I look forward. That'd be great to do.
Okay, so, well, I don't know how much in-depth we're going to be able to get to then, but I wanted to explore the interaction in the way that different powers show up specifically in relation to different mojos. For instance, how does Vi show up differently for Jaini versus Nijai? How does Zai show up differently for Naiji and Zaini?
Okay.
That kind of thing. And that was the original topic, but I didn't realize we were because with Nijai and Naiji, us being the only two, we don't share any powers in common consciously. So that may be kind of a more difficult topic with just us.
I think it'd be a very good topic. I think we should just kind of start working into it and see where it goes. So probably I'm thinking the best would be let's pick a channel, Jez, Vez, Nez, whatever, and then let's flow that channel through all the mojos and see how long that takes. But that should make a really good discussion. So Starglow, since your topic, which channel would you like to start with?
Well, let's start with. I tell you what, let's go backwards from the way we normally do in the Nijez channel, because a lot of times we don't get to the Vi and the Z and the
start with the
Vez and the Zez. Yeah, because we start talking about the Nai and the Ni and that, and then the Jai and the Ji, and that overtakes the whole thing. So let's
and those
talk
are perhaps more obvious anyway for us.
Right, right. And so that, and we generally are going to bring those in anyway.
How about just go round robin here a little bit and have some people.
So talking about Vi and V for all mojos.
Different ones. So how about we take some turns just picking different ones to say something about that's different, and then we'll figure out which ones we missed at the end. So Starglow, do you want to start, pick any mojo, and talk about their literal power?
Okay, so Well, okay. Let's start with how Vi and V are different in the two mojos that are here, Naiji and Nijai. What's the relationship in the Vi and the V where we don't have?
That's a different thing. That's actually the inspirational relationship. If we want to talk about what I thought you were going with the topic, we probably need to start with then at least the romantics and compare the Durams and compare the Adrams, right? So because actually started the conversation was comparing the Nijai and Jaini Vi.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So let's
Naiji versus
Then you can move that to like the ad serbs and the
Well, since this is Interpretives Temple, let's go with that. Let's go back to that then, because it's just I'm having a hard time since I don't have a Zaini or a Jaini here. I'm having a hard time keeping that.
In mind. But let's go.
You had some thoughts on the difference between Jaini and Nijai. You were saying, Coach, before.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, let's start with the difference between how Vi is used, the Vej channel is used in Jaini and Nijai. Because we started talking about this a bit before we were on camera. I experience the Jaini's different powers, even though they have the same exact powers that I do. But they seem so different in how they're used to me. So like the Vi on a Jaini seems to be more about like that causes a bigger steadying power, a bigger calming, like it's a reliance that you can rely on that to be steady. And in the Nijai, like I often feel like we're dinged for being flighty and that's the way we're supposed to be, but it's like we don't the Jaini has I experience them as steady and you can count on them, and it's the constant flow that seems to come out that just seems a bit foreign to me. It's like not.
Well, it's different than momentum for sure. You have major, minor.
But you wouldn't even like. People that don't study Mojo wouldn't even realize how much of a big difference it is, because it's the same two momentum powers. It's the same 4 powers. How does that difference in the placement of the Vi make that huge difference between the two Mojos?
Well, it's like we've seen in all the Mojos is that the relationship to the offside power is a lot easier to get to. So, for us, say, Nijez compared to Genez, grabbing that logic easier. In fact, it's quite common to kind of overdo that.
So it can seem more comfortable than a minor momentum sometimes, because you don't have to leave your main layer, whichever that is, objective or subjective.
It's true.
Oh, right, because you're still in the objective portion when you grab the Z, and instead of going underwater for Nijai, opposite for Naiji, of course, but instead of going underwater, you grab that Z power because that's double barreling right up front. Both are objective, and you can just grab that with your knee and roll with it.
Sure, because there's these kind of like zones everyone has based on the kind of synomnia sections we're talking about. So for the one we talk about most often is the momentum and modulation. So for example, Naiji, we're actually both the Durams. We're going to have a Duram momentum compound and a AdPrac modulation compound. But same thing with the AdRoms, but inverse. But this also happens from the front to back, and different riffs can accentuate it more, but there's always going to be that strength from the front to the rear. The subjectives are going to have a strong association in the back. So the name I kind of give that for the AdRoms, and really all those 4, that shades, is this like heavy, nostalgic poignancy. It's Vi with Jai as the back 2 powers. And only the Nijai, Jaini, Vi-Z, and Z-Vi have that particular combination. And so if you look at it from that point of view, that nostalgia pull, that actually has a stronger pull on the Zhai than the Ni Zhai naturally, because they are in more.
But that's why that go-to, it's the same for them as the Ni and the Z for me. It's that immediate pull Zhai Vi that they can just pull that together, and that's just a blanket that's there. Like it's a go-to thing for me. Like I'm going Ni Z. That's how I'm interacting with the world. But that blanket feeling, that warm, safe, comforting feeling that comes off of that's because it's the Zhai Vi is a tandem piece that they pull together, even though it's opposite sides of momentum modulation. That's not where but that's, yeah, wow, I hadn't really thought of it that way. Like, because they're pulling that Zhai Vi, that steadiness, and that's a relation to Vi that I don't have, because my Vi tends to come from, like, it's more connected to my, that's strange, because to me my Vi is more connected with my Z hitting it, like it's details.
What you're kind of talking about is actually quite simple, but it's profound. So it's like, I almost feel like you should say more about it, but really is that much of difference between hierarchy ranks. Because having it fourth means you really have to flex the whole peak pathway consciously to get to it. Where the offside power, you do have to flex, but you can kind of instinctually flex a lot easier.
Yeah, but it's a shift.
If you flex your source power a lot, it will tend to bump into the offside. I mean, it's just mathematics, obvious, but a lot easier. For that reason, there can be more disassociating from the polar power easier, like not acknowledging it's there, having it surprise you. So Vi for both the Ni Alpha is going to be a lot more surprising for them. Like for Xiaolin, her Vi surprises her less, and she's more like okay with it. Like she has a more energetically, it's not culture.
She holds it like Xiaolin holds that Vi as part of her tower. Like it doesn't feel to me like it's part of my tower really, even though there's the nostalgia details Zhai Vi. Well, I have that, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't really feel like the Vi is part of my centering part of my tower like it does for Xiaolin.
Well,
like
it's good. That part's going to be the same for both all the mojos there. It is two separate things. But for a subjective, being in that experience, the offside power can just come in automatically a bit just because they're hanging out that much in the subjective realm.
Right, whereas for me, like the Z comes in automatically because when I'm objecting, I'm out, I'm kneeing, I'm also articulating. They're together.
Well, the space kind of brings up the point of, I guess the basic thing of the powers being different is how they're oriented. So the biggest orientation difference is momentum versus modulation, but another critical one, the one that comes after it, is subjective-objective. And so being a Ni Alpha, Ni is going to be first. So everything is the point of the Ni need. So the Ni needs a rudder. That's Zhai's job. It's a rudder. It's a tower power, but its purpose is as a rudder.
Right, for Ni Zhai. It's
because it's there to make the Ni more successful. Same thing with Z. With Z, for example, for actually the Vi Z and the Zhai Ni, it kind of comes out in like a more defender mode more. Whereas the Ni Zhai and the V Zhai, it's more attached to their acquisitiveness.
Yes, it's like
the V and Ni, like ooh,
ask questions. Yes.
Let me ask questions. Let me get into this. Let me get in all the drawers. It's more attached to that purpose. For the subjective, same powers, but naturally being subjective oriented, the Z is like, hey, are you messing with the Vi, or you do what the Vi says, or are you trying to get to the tower, or do you not? I mean, it kind of comes out and asserts for that subjective, key driving principle of their story.
Yeah, so the difference there then is for the Nijai, it's part of the need, inquisitive, figure it out, give me the answers, give me the pieces.
Exactly.
I need this stuff. And for the Shiny, that Vi is that piece that's always there that
Well,
feeds the.
again, this gets back into as simple as this: is that the purpose for the Jai starting is the Jai.
Right.
So the Ni, its job is to kind of like bring stuff to the tower. It's like a collection service. It goes out and gathers things in the forest and brings them back to the tower.
And V collects.
Exactly, but the tower is the key. The Vi is a curator of the tower. So that's a kind of a different function that tends to be, say, for example, like Nijai or a Nizai. The Vi is like remembers where you stashed your tower because
Because we move our towers.
you move your towers lots. It's more like a record, like, oh yeah, you put your tower over there. Oh yeah, but for
and it turns over your source momentum too, which is just such a huge part of your story in terms of orienting it, and by far bigger than any of the other powers. So
Yeah, like so.
Oh,
the polar powers.
I'll hear a little more from Mitchell, please. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, the polar power for like the for the Nijai and the Jaini, it's such a stretch. Like for the other two powers, there's something there where there's more of the similarity to your source power. Whereas for the polar power, you're going like all the way across your psyche and modulating the main energy that nourishes you. So it's always going to be really extreme and kind of a finalizer sort of thing for the peak pathway.
I like that.
That's why Jaini Z, when for Jaini to go into Z mode as compared to a Nijai, they're actually modulating basically the main function of their mojo to do that. But they have to do that. We have to actually grow and go all the way, and that's also how they get to their other to some degree. But same thing for the Nijai and
You're right.
their Vi.
There has to be a much higher needs driver to make them do that, to make it
get away from the source. Whereas when you're going your offside, you're going away from your minor momentum.
Right.
Which is there's a lot more jumping between the minor momentum modulation.
I.e. why for Jailene that Vi seems like part of her tower, and for her the Z is the further reach. For her the Z is the thing that has to see, and that seems so foreign to me.
And that's where you'll hear that, for example, in the Zaini and Jaini, and actually all the towers is the tower tunnel. You can hear them like chum 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 chum, like walking out the tower to like and then back into the tower. So they that longer walk is always there, and it's just if you study like nature, it just comes down to energy, and because it's a polar power, you'll just have to have a very good reason why you're spending that much energy. It's like you will always look for reason, like, do we really, if you're Jaini or a Zaini, like, do I really need to go out there and articulate? Why?
It's like deeper in the Daryu, too, to go to the polar power as opposed to the offside. Like, it's more confusing a little bit because you're going away from that source momentum, which orients you. I'm pointing to mine, which for me that would be V, as opposed to Zai, where you can stay. Zai doesn't really directly modulate your Nai. I mean, it kind of does a little bit because it modulates your Ji, which is connected to your Nai, but you can kind of do a little bit of both. Whereas when you're going to V, the energy from your Nai is deflating.
Immediately, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk then perhaps about the Durams? Do you want to start us off, Mitchell? Like the V differences you may have noticed?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit too, like when we were doing like some mojo readings, some of the difference to like Shinai and Naiji when they do their V, is that well, first of all, obviously Shinai have like the brighter eyes, they're the gatherings a little bit easier for them, and
smoother.
Also like when Naiji and Jinai, when we like lock on to someone. That's what's one of your. I mean, I guess that's also kind of Nai in a way, maybe, but also it's V because like you're connected to like literal.
Yeah, the Nai Alpha definitely do lock on more with their V than the NES pilots because again it has to be like a reason. So you're like, okay, high beams are on.
It's like very extreme. That's the difference. So like when Naiji do V, it's like it kind of creeps people out a little bit because we look very driven when we're doing it.
Well, that's
like,
a great.
Yeah, because
There's always that intent behind it.
That's a good point, Mitchell. If you have the right audience for the NIAL, for example, which is a lot hard to get this. The V is seen as like, ooh, that's delicious, like a specialty, but it's very specialized. Even just they still have it for modulation, but when you notice the G9 and the Z9, the bountifulness that V gives, that lift, it's much more apparent with them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like the lift of it, it's not as like creepy driven, sort of, and it's a little more meshes better with like kind of dialoguing and kind of just going back and forth with their V.
It doesn't seem as not that we're trying to do this, but manipulative or agenda driven. Their V is not as agenda driven. Like if a Z9 is getting their V going, they could just be really in their Z, having a good time, and the V kicks on. Same as G9. They're having a good time with people, and next thing you know, their V comes up, their body is moving, they're seeing it. It's not.
It's fun.
It's
There's
less
a funness.
What's the word for it? Yeah, fun and the word for that. We think about it ahead of time. Premeditated? Yes, less premeditated work.
Less premeditated. Yeah, and look, when I should do that, sometimes it's like I think one of the reasons it's creepy, and it's kind of related to Nye, because Nye flavors a whole peak pathway, which is that we look like we're just sort of following our independence in mind. Like when we lock on to someone and just look at them with our eyes, it's like we're just kind of letting the visions tell us what to do, and we're going to just do the V that we absolutely need to do for the vision, not really just to have fun or just...
Right. Well, the other side of that is that we actually are kind of like really locking onto them, but it still goes what you're saying. It's because they're an
or any task or anything.
It's because they're an object of interest to the vision. This is where that premeditated quality comes in. It's not just like, oh, hey, I'm happy to see you. I'm happy to see you because you fit in with my art or my project. And
my agenda.
Yeah, and as far as the connoisseurship of V goes, our connoisseurship tends to be much more focused. Like it's like only stuff that our vision cares about, you know?
Very fetishy.
Nez pilots have a much broader appreciation spectrum.
Yeah.
I envy that in a lot of ways they're able to do that.
Yeah. I wonder how does that relate maybe to like the Adram and the Vi, maybe like the Ni Alpha have like super fetishy Vi. A lot of them are like super good at like memorizing like academic stuff like Ken Jennings.
But it has to be very much more like specific.
Yeah.
One I noticed when we was doing like recitations, Jailene's strong on that. The Vi really helps out.
Like Nijai Ken Jennings, you know, he has like all this incredible academic knowledge to do Jeopardy. Maybe he'd like forget his appointments.
Yeah, that's like you look at Vi Alpha politicians, for example, and their Vi is much more. It feels much more like a full blown like worldview. You know, it's like it feels much more like a worldview that's like dominating their story and the way they look at everything and things like that. And in a way, you know, all worldviews are going to be like that, but it feels like it plays like such a major role that like it explains their, you know, the way they do everything, you know.
It drives them.
Yeah, it drives them.
Well, the details all fit in with that bigger worldview that they have in as their primary driver. Like for Nijai, we can memorize huge reams of details, but only on the specific topic that we've been fetishing on, or only on this thing that we need to know, or this thing that we, you know, like I know Nijai that have memorized every baseball stat of their team forever and ever and ever for decades, and they can reel them off and you know stuff like that. But that's the only thing they have memorized. They can't tell you their name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Or like consistently hit certain, you know, scheduling things over a period of time, like every time hit that on time. That's a whole other. That's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Real quick, back on the V, I've noticed is that say the Nez pilots compared to the Nez Alpha is, and of course this goes even more so if those who have the V further. There's like a robustness, an ability to. We were talking about kind of like them giving off the V, but also I'd say taking in the V.
Yeah.
They can
like a very adaptive kind of way.
They can enjoy it. They just have a more ability to process a higher amount of it.
And
again, that's something I admire that they have. I see them similar. You're talking about the Vajani to Nijai. I see I'm similar to Jinai, but certain things like, man, they're so different. That's one. They can just drink in a whole lot more. And it's only one position different. They're not like a Vez Tower or a V Alpha.
Right.
But still, it's such a big difference how much more robust they are and a larger appetite and a broader spectrum of interests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they can be on much more things than, like, yeah. And, like, for Nijai on the V, it's like, well, V only comes to my attention when I'm absolutely, when it's necessary that it come to my attention. Like, I could just do without the V.
Mitchell, so are you saying something else, though?
I was just saying I was relating to the hunters in our towers, too. You know, it's more like when hunters... But obviously, when any directive does when a Gmo does their Zai, it's going to be... They're going to look a little bit altered state, but for a hunter, it's kind of, you made this analogy before, it's kind of like we're just taking an annoying timeout from our momentum. Whereas for a pilot, it's like trying to stay in the tower is much, much harder.
It's like being in prison. They're like,
no! This is like one of those, it's the same thing for them. Them picking up their V is the same thing when I pick up my Z. They're just picking up their V. They just roll right into it, like, da-da-da, there's the V.
They just have to say something.
Yeah.
Then maybe you can move on a little bit talking about, say, the other ones of the shades, or maybe talking cerebrals. Where do you want to go first? Do cerebral? Maybe just cerebrals for interpretives.
Yeah, do cerebrals, yes. It's
okay, so
normally...
obviously the one that really jumps out is the difference, even when you're looking at primarily, say, V, when you shift what other power is paired with in the compound relationship. So, like, I can see in the Ni-Z and the Z-Ni, their V, it has that sensualist quality. Their V being paired with Zhai, they have a... They have an appreciation for, like, sort of like, I don't know, like...
the taking in of the sensual, yes, I totally get that. Because when...
Durams, their V, although we actually are like romantics, that's our thing as far as momentum, but actually our V is more gritty.
Yeah.
The Durams have a rather gritty, in the forest kind of version of V.
The Zenai with that V being attached to that Zhai, I totally can get that. That's you see that with the Zenai guys. Of course, they're more prevalent. But even like Rachel Maddow, she likes that sensual incoming experience of V. It's the pleasure incoming of V.
When their eyes light up with a perk up, often you'll see that resonating comes right along with the rock.
Yes, like, you know, she takes in the taste. If you ever see her drink, sometimes they do those things where they'll do the drink. They have the drink of the hour or whatever, and she'll take a drink of it, and you'll just see that Zhai kick in with the V. That's
part of the ride, yeah.
Yeah.
But both the Durams, when you see like our V kick in, there's usually, even we're doing like academic stuff, it just kind of looks more like your car's handling a turn. You know what I mean? Like it has like that wide eye, you're playing a video game. It's more like, you know what I mean, V of a video game play. Like, okay, yeah. It's kind of interesting like that. Even when I relive stuff, I noticed like if you look at Naiji versus Naizi when they like relive things, ironically, when it comes to reliving, the Der Serbs get more of an emotional ride with that. Actually, I get more emotional, as the Jedi does as well, when I'm pondering. When I'm in my simulator, I'll get more emotions going, but actually...
Or try to move other people.
But like when my V gets going, I get cooler. Like even just thinking like take a ride. Taking a ride just has a cooler quality to me naturally, and the Genii.
Because it's that Xi coldness that goes with the down to the V for y'all, right? So it's like it hits the Xi and you get cool, and then you do the V. So it's the cool V. Like, and that's.
Well, I see that the Genii both have a lot, and actually it does help them in certain kind of learning, particularly like martial arts. Both Durams really excel at them, and one of the things is, I'm curious if you guys experience this. I'm sure probably Mitchell has with tennis. when I'm reliving something or I'm kind of watching another person, I feel my body move. Like my V and Xi are very closely connected to where I go through like motions, ergonomic motions. Like I can like if I see in a movie, even if I'm being passionately moved by Ni and G, if my V gets into it, the Xi is automatically there. It's kind of like I ergonomically are in the scene.
Yeah, when I'm playing my best tennis, I'm like almost there's. I mean, you might like if you hit a really good shot, you might try to pump yourself up with some G a little bit, but that's more like proactive. But I'm like really dissociated. Like it feels like the motions are just. If I start like thinking too much or start getting emotional, it kind of disturbs the ride that I'm on. I get very just in the zone.
So, question, Mitchell, are you always then, as like in real time, analyzing as you're Ving because it hits through Xi first? Are you always? Is it always that perfection? Analyzing the V as you're going through it real time? Is that how it?
Kind of. Also, when I think of analyzing, I also think of Nye a little bit because it sounds like a little more structured. Because like when Xi analyzes things obviously, but also it kind of just, that's what the cool thing about the towers is, it hits and they just kind of have that like kind of gut response.
Yeah.
That's just sort of
Yeah, 'cause I
immediate,
don't think
and that's really the strongest state where it's like immediate reactive.
That's where
and it's cool.
Exactly, and that's where it relates to the V, is that the faster the experiences are happening, the more things are going to be on the right side, the adaptive side. So the V starts coming, your tower will have to do more of it than, say, your worldview.
Yeah.
Worldview is good for an overarching trajectory of the day, but not like momentary bullet times.
Like I'm breaking down a match afterward, then I'm going to bring in my Nye and be like, okay, well then I'm going to structure like what happened here, why did this happen, and then and you bring in your Xi there a little bit too.
And when you visualize beforehand, lots of Nye there as well.
Oh,
so in relation to like say a G Nye or a Z Nye where the V is in front of the Xi, for a G Nye then it doesn't hit Xi first, so they're in the moment of it and much freer.
Well, actually, what I was doing here is we can get into that, but I was making the contrast between the V to the Xi as opposed to V with Xi. But yes, there would be the appetite difference, of course, and the priority difference.
Yeah, so I should leave out the Z Nye then on that conversation because they don't have the Xi. So if we're going with the Xi, then say
that's saying, yeah, we can kind of look at it, the V. I guess now we've gotten the V into 4 positions, which is the Durams and the Durserves, but then also the Nye Alpha versus the Nez Towers.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is though is anything where the Xi has to come before the V. There's this coolness. There's this.
No, that's okay. That's what I thought you were saying. So no, it's not a priority thing. It's going to be what it's linked to. So for the G Nye, when they get their V going, it's going to have Xi. Now, granted, the V kicks on more before the Xi does, but that's still their compound.
Okay.
So for them, it's just an ordering thing. They're naturally going to be having, say, G first. They're going to be more proactive in the environment. So V will kick on more, and they'll start getting pumped with the V. But as soon as the V is getting pumped, it's automatically going to be flavored with its compound, which is Xi. So G Nye are like us the same way, that when they get worked up, they're more inclined to, instead of finding balance before performing, they naturally perform. Z Nye too. So for both them, going to the V, like Donald Trump, getting pumped, animated, that goes quickly, and then the rudder comes on. The rudder comes on 4th. So get pumped comes on 3rd, the rudder comes on 4th. For the Nye Alpha, rudder comes, once they even start like thinking I might get pumped, the rudder comes on. Rudder comes on before getting pumped.
That's a pretty good example of like a Z Nye who's like.
So I think what I'm trying to order then is.
I just want to finish the thought but even when the V is initially being turned on more primarily by a Nez pilot, the G Nye's V will automatically have more of a kind of visceral, physical, ergonomic kind of intention. Whereas the Xeni, it's still going to have Zhai coming along with it. It's just going to turn on before a Ni-Z's would. They will animate before the Ni-Z will. But that animated V is still going to be a centralist compound.
That's interesting. Wonder like all the ways that plays out and affects things.
Okay, so two things here. There's two pieces then here. There's the fact that for an objective directive with V, that V is gonna pop on as a much more freer. There's gonna be more energy freed up to hit the V first. But that's the Xi will still.
They won't have to authorize it, so to speak, by the
just
tower.
pop on.
The hunters compared to pilots, hunters have to kind of authorize going into pumped up mode.
So it will just, if there's enough free energy going from, say, your objective power to subjective power, it's going to just overflow into the V and express out that way.
Yeah.
And then, so it's just going to, that V's just going to express out and show up in body movement or show up objectively out there.
The natural byproduct of the G or Z engaging heavily, if they engage heavily and it goes on for any kind of duration, the V will just come up.
But the flavor of the V itself, that energy is always going to be still defined by the object of the
tower it's connected to.
The tower it's connected to. So for a Xi user with V, that's going to come on with a cool, with a evaluating sort of V energy, whereas for a V user with Xi, it's going to come on with a more sensual flavor, more enjoyment or not enjoyment, more evaluation based on that flavor.
Yeah, you'll see that, for example, like Durham in MMA versus Durserb, and there are all four of them, is the Durams tend to come in naturally more hot, which is considered a good trait to have. They come in aggressive. They're able to kind of like get in the mood to fight easier. So getting the mood for fighting easier to do. That can be for the Durserbs, they have a hard time with that, but they naturally can start applying force without being hot. That's cool too. Then it switches when the exchanges start happening. The bodies start hitting each other, the sweat starts going, there's bruises and so forth. You'll start noticing that there continues to be the overall heated drive for the Durams. But when they get hit, it's Xi. As the bumps and bruises of the fight just happen, they kind of just Xi it.
And it gets cold and unflappable, and you can't mess with me. And
they'll go forward hot, but they take the hits and the. And
I'm guessing the Durserbs get more hot as the fight progresses.
They have like a freight train kind of quality going forward, but when they take hits, you see that De Niro. They get that shot first, like
sour. Yeah.
Sour, you ain't stopping me. This train ain't stopping.
That's a personal insult. When you hit
exactly.
V and Xi, it's going to be a personal insult that I'm getting hit, because it's going to hit that. I totally get that Xi. Oh my God, you actually hit me! How dare you, sort of thing. Whereas for a Xi V user, it's going to be a, you hit me. Let me just evaluate that and get back at you.
Well, actually, the main difference is that the Xi kind of goes like, kind of like Daniel Craig from James Bond. Some crazy shit happens, supposed to scare a normal human. He just gives that little, that's all you get from me, just a little Xi. Like I'm annoyed, but that's not going to stop me. Like Mitchell said, that just makes you a little sour. But I'm going to sour stomp you now. Whereas with the Durams, and actually also the Baiji, actually all the G-Mojos, they generally go the route of showing nothing. Like they'll show aggression going forward, but when you hit them, their Xi generally just tries to, like, I'm hitting those terms, soak it. It just soaks it. It tries to, like, its body and the face, like, show that, like, nothing happened. Like,
well, it's because it shuts the whole, the Xi brings the Vi shade down, right? So, like, it Vi shades the whole face.
You don't want to show. Because it hits you, your G might show too much, so the Xi is like, don't show nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the Xi just...
It shows it's annoyed. It's kind of funny. which is funny because when they go forward like to be aggressive, usually Der Serbs, and also actually really all of them start doing this, the Z, Vi, and the Vi Z, they generally don't necessarily show as much like attitude in the offense. But when you try to hit them, they'll show more attitude. The Jai will comp an attitude. Whereas the G-Mojos generally comp an attitude starting the fight. Like, that's their momentum. And momentum, when they're hitting you, they comp an attitude. But then when you try to, like, shut them down or whatever, they kind of go, like, I guess you're saying stubborn.
Yeah, they come in really hot, but then they get, like, more, I guess, technical and cooler as the fight progresses.
Well, it's not so much how
and more wrapped in their tower.
I would say this, is that when it comes to, say, aggression and stubbornness, those are two traits that come up a lot in these matches. One's forward and one is resistant. The G-Mojos are hot on aggression and cold on stubbornness. They have a cold, stubborn streak. Whereas the Z-Mojos, they're cool on offense. Their force is just bop, 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 bop. There's not much heat to it. But they get hot on stubborn. They have like a...
because I mean it's not so much like a linear progression. It's gonna flare up in different ways. And
basically like
push, there's gonna be different phases, different points where one person just like smacking the other, and they're on the defense, and different points where it's the other way around.
The Jai, when you cross those boundaries, it's a personal insult. Right. So that's gonna be like, I don't think Zai users take that crossing the boundary as a personal insult so much. Like when it hits Jai though, and you cross this boundary for Jai, that's a personal insult. Now I have to do something about it.
We'll take it as insult their G, but their Zai actually goes the route of, I don't want to give you any credit.
Right.
Yeah. It kind of mind jobs that. You kind of mind job with that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the mind jobby thing that Zai does. But Jai just goes, you know you didn't.
They're both very effective. Like I said, using the word boundaries, Ben, might help there, is basically taking ground and holding ground. G-Mojos take ground hot, and they hold ground cold. Z-Mojos take ground cold, they hold ground hot.
Yeah, because we don't have any, like, Z-Mojos, we just take the ground. It's just the next progressive step and the next progressive step. But if we get hit, that's a personal insult. When we get hit, it's a, no you didn't, and bam with the Z.
Okay, cool. While we're here, we'll mention some of the other ones. I guess maybe we got a little time left here. We can maybe briefly touch on some of the other ones in the literals. We kind of mentioned, I guess, Z and G in general. Maybe just finish up here by going like all the Jai-Mojos. So there's going to be the difference between what the Vi's, we're talking about the Vi now, Vi connected with Z versus Vi connected with G. So
yeah, totally.
I'll Ben say anything a little bit here. Ben, have you anything to say as far as like what you notice on how, for example, the different Jai-Mojos use their
Jai and Vi and Zai and Vi.
Wait, did he say?
No, it's the Vi. It's Vi with G versus Vi with Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably some stuff to say about that from the debates and stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was watching. I've been watching a lot of the debates, and I noticed that. Well, I guess I don't. Oh yeah. So there's some Vi Z there. Okay. So yeah, with the Vi with Z, I noticed that, like, for example, Jeb Bush, he speaks in a rather he speaks very frankly, But that's sort of his thing. He speaks very frankly, very very matter of fact about the matter. Very much so, appealing to the establishment. That's his ideology, but it sort of comes off that way in the way he speaks too. And it's less personal when he makes his remarks. He may say something personal, but that more brings in the Jai, and it doesn't happen as often. And in the way he speaks, it doesn't have that direct G kind of connection. Whereas with Vi G, it's different. They they have that Vi which naturally makes them sound like they're knowing, they're concerned, and things like that. But they'll speak more personally. G aware. They'll have that kind of personal connection to their audience and the people they're speaking to.
Definitely.
So Vizy then they deliver in such a way it's frank, matter of fact talking,
Yeah,
and
it feels like
Vigy
some of the most frank, matter of fact speak that you can basically hear. Like the
Yeah.
pure pracs, I
like
think have
Sure.
it's
that.
I'd agree there, Ben.
they're well, and the other piece of that is they carry a certain authority based on the fact that they're not biased, they don't have
Yeah.
any
Yeah, and
emotional change. It's
Baiji
just
are very matter of fact, but they speak more like in a friendly, personal way about it.
Or
Uh,
if they don't speak friendly,
it might not be friendly. Sorry, I
it'll be
shouldn't say friendly,
unfriendly,
but
but it's
it's more
personal.
personal.
Yeah.
It might be baleful. It might be like Bernie Sanders getting all pissed off. I mean, but
It's interesting too, and how you can see how nature has made them perfectly balanced is on that bend. Like in the politics, you'll see, for example, like the two Vi Alpha. It is neat how they'll do it. It reminds me actually of MMA because they both show up there too, and they do
yeah,
the same thing in debating, which is the Vi Z. Just as you're saying, Ben, they'll start by making a very matter-of-fact point, very kind of legal, make
yeah,
like a legal argument. But a lot of times that legal argument is like can be pretty rough and bracing, and then the shy kind of notes that afterwards, and then just sort of tilts it like
yeah, yeah.
yes,
Because like
and it comes like
once they
morally,
start
I feel
talking.
okay with what I just said. I feel okay with that.
Yeah, because once they start talking to each other and debating with each other, then they're like getting hit by each other, and then the Jai comes in more.
For
Um,
sure. And they do the
and then
company
like with his eye
walk
comes in
out
more
like
with the
make a
5G, like Marco Rubio, like when I believe there's at one point where Ted Cruz, like he made some points and some arguments against him. He went like very technical on his eye, like and really didn't want to give him any credit on his points, and did a lot, really went into like kind of a very hardcore debater kind of mode, when that happened. Whereas Vi Z is more likely to sort of take things a little bit more personally in their reaction.
in the reactions.
Uh, they'll give a cool maybe Z logical delivery in response to that possibly, but in the reaction you can feel that that's how they're receiving things.
Definitely. Excellent. That's a great talk. It's about pretty much on the time, and I think we said some really good stuff there. Does that cover that topic pretty good there, Starglow?
yeah. I mean, we can
We got
always
one
go.
channel.
We can always go more. There's always more for us to talk about
Yeah,
because
clearly,
it's
we
never
only
ending.
covered one channel, but I think we kind of got a good idea of how versatile powers are and how different they are just by one, if you shift the ranking or you shift the compound. Very different.
Yeah, and it's like I don't think people realized. Like I hope that this brought to the audience some awareness of just how different each power is when it's paired up with the other three, because it really does make a huge amount of difference on how that's paired up. You wouldn't think it's such an alien thing to go one spot over, or
It's also it's very humbling in a good way when you start trying to figure out exactly how complex humanity is. When you realize that, wow, powers that I have conscious myself, when they're actually paired with something else or just one ranking difference, so different from my consciousness, that language they speak. But that's the language of existence. And so you're like, whoa, it's a big language, and I only start with a piece of it. It keeps perspective.
And that's
Yeah.
just humanity.
Yeah, but excited, like, ooh, but it all connects. It's
Yeah,
fun.
it's like even within mojos, you have all these different riffs too.
Oh, good.
So like
Oh
even
my
if
God.
just
How
one
different is a riff
mojo,
can be. Oh,
it's like now you're talking about other mojos. Yeah, you have
hey,
one
that's a good
mojo.
point. That's a good point, Ben. Yeah, you
It's
don't
like-
have to step outside your own mojo to be like, whoa, it's so different.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of the way, I mean, like even in the same mojo, you may rely on a different power more than based on other things, and so the riffs are going to all be different. But still, I think for Nijai, like I recognize in a Nijai, even if that riff is very different than mine, I can go, oh, but I can see how they got there, sort of thing.
That's the
I
key
can
step.
I can see how that fits.
Yeah, and like once you learn how to read, like Mazoot doesn't really, you're much more able to see through a person's Mazoot, because I think the world often like gets thrown off by Mazoot a lot, and that's why they don't. A pretty
Mazoot-
big reason why they don't know how to read.
Yeah, Mizzou combined with the general tendency also of thinking that the world of humanity is like you, or should be.
Yeah.
It's very hard not to think like that. You know what I mean? Some of the smartest, wise thinkers in human history still got stumped by that one.
Yeah, because I find that a lot with when dealing with G users, that they like G users think everybody is aware of how the rituals go and all that kind of stuff. So like that one piece, and that's only if you split on that one aspect of G and Jai. But like a G user will go, but you should know that. I mean, you mean, what do you mean you don't see what's? And I'm like, but
because everyone goes with what's on their energetic agenda. So like for Jai users, it's the same thing, which is I need to have my independence respected. You notice that if Jai user, for example, if they don't have that curve with modulation or their other, there's the thing of like that's not feasible. You couldn't actually have everyone Jai being given that much individual attention and let them do what they want. But Jai will naturally advocate for total respect for individuality.
But on the other hand, Coach, I think we as Jai users get dinged for that. We learn that lesson much earlier in life because we realize, like, we get the impingement of...
I disagree with that. I disagree. As far as I know in the data, there is no one really that's not been mucking it up.
I'm not saying not muck it up.
There's examples all over. I wouldn't even know where to start making an assertion like that. I don't have enough data yet.
I don't mean to say that nobody's not mucking it up, Coach, but...
No, I'm not trying to say down people. I'm just saying, like, I've yet to see that one power... If anything, you could say this, perhaps, maybe this generalization, is that the SS index, yes, the closer you are to the lower end, the more easy it is to be validated, and so Jai is higher than G. So I hear you on that one.
Yeah, I think that's actually what I was getting at. I think some of the when your powers are those powers that are further closer to that end of the reality SS index, I think they get don't get dinged for those powers.
Is a spiritual power too. So that's a
right, but you like.
It is close. It is closer to that end in the sense that it's lowered down, but they're still both on the spiritual side.
But overwhelmingly, despite that, is even people who actually, for example, who think they're mojo other than they are, if you watch them live their life, they will inevitably try to orient existence around their powers. That's just humanity. I've yet to see humans that just don't do that. It takes a really diligent spirit that will pay attention to nature saying you might be wrong here.
let me comment for this direction, Coach, and I don't know, but I think this is a really big point that like, for instance, let me come at it from Nye then, because Nye is the highest on the SS index. I think y'all learn that not everybody has access to that information that you have as Nye because it's not validated.
So I'm acknowledging both things. I'm acknowledging that the higher up in the SS index, less validation, and so you will be told you are not the center of the story more often. However, with that said, even larger than that, as strong as that is, I don't think it's as strong as the pervasive view that almost every human has deep in their core that their story is the way the story should be. That's all powers, all motives. I've seen that scene. So, granted, I think like some are more than others, but
like, I'm not saying that Jai users don't say, well, everybody ought to have the Jai, that everybody ought to go by Jai. That's not what I'm saying. I think, though, that Jai users learn at an earlier age that everybody's Jai can't be this, like, everybody can't get their heart's desire all the time. Like, we learned that. I'm gonna
have to. I can't agree with the statement Jai users. It's too broad. The data does not. I don't have enough data to make that assessment. I can go as far as what I did go, which is that Jai users will have more validation than G users. That's true in general.
So the point that I was trying to make, though, when I first started trying to make it is what I've experienced is that coming from G users, because G is validated, because G is something that's slightly lower on the SS index, that G users simply don't acknowledge.
I don't know. The use of the word G users and Ja users in this context.
It's one rank lower in the SS index. I mean, I understand there's a difference, but it's not necessarily like night and day, you know.
And for me to say that like Ja users, G users, one or the other, I don't know if it's that broad of a trend as to make it that quite blanket. But I do agree that it does happen, and that Ja is higher in the SS index, so it's not getting validated as much. And that's just true, totally.
I know I'm just not articulating the point as well as I could.
I hear what you're saying, but like just to counterpoint that is that I've known a lot of Gmojos in my life, and in general, most of the bubbles of G around any given bubble of G tell that bubble of G it's wrong. So G's more like agrees on certain things, but generally it does not agree that G from other bubbles is correct. Then, within any given bubble of G, you generally have G within a bubble saying that G isn't doing it right. They're not up to bubble standards.
Yeah, so, but it's not just the specific G. It's the fact like that G. Okay, so.
What is it that you want to have credit for? I'm trying to figure it out because I.
The point I'm trying to get at is that G users don't. G users don't like.
See, this is very important. When we say G users, I have to just let your Z be aware of this, my Xi. That statement, from a Podler point of view, is very powerful mathematically, and you have to understand what it means. To say G users are like such and such, with no qualifiers to time and place or it's too broad. That I don't know if that's something I could say like has been through every generation to where we are now. You said.
Yeah, but the principle I'm trying to get at is broader than what I'm obviously successfully getting across. The principle that I'm trying to get at is I think that it doesn't matter what the G is, it's that G users, in my experience, so that's only in my lifetime and only in the G people that I've come across, and only in my limited ability to spot G users. So with all of those qualifiers, right? G users tend to expect of everyone, whether they're Xi or G, to be able to see, to have an awareness of the G threads through everything. And I'm not saying like different bubbles, this G or that G. That's not what I'm making the comparison of. On the flip side of that, Xi users, we early learned that my G, even like I can't, like everybody can't have full Xi. Like if you,
just know I see the issue here. You're actually mixing two logical assertions, because on the assertion that not everyone can have the Xi they want, that same logical principle that you just stated there, it's equivalent for G would be that G doesn't have that, but that's not the case. G generally thinks that other G should correct itself. So it comes thinking that not all G should be getting its way. It just, most G that I've experienced in my life does not actually think that all G should get its way. It almost always thinks that a lot of the G should stop doing it the way it's doing it and change the proper way.
That actually gets at the exact thing. The piece of the G that says you shouldn't be doing it that way is the piece that Xi users learn early. That you.
Okay. No. That's what I'm saying. That's the logical thing that you're mixing. You're actually saying that's a developmental thing that is putting Xi at some sort of implied further development level. But
no, that's not.
The way you're stating it does have that implied, but actually the thing you're talking about, wanting everyone to change to be like Xi is, that would be a part of the directive component. Do you mean that's as opposed to they didn't get pushed back by the world? Because Xi does get pushed back by the world, but it naturally pushes into it instead of holding ground because it's a pusher. So even well-developed Xi is not going to be a tower.
Yeah, I don't think I'm articulating I don't think I'm articulating the principle quite
Try doing
well enough.
writing?
But let me know where I'm missing things here, Starglow, because you're saying that Jai users have to come to this realization sooner. That is implied, unless I'm getting it wrong, that they, from this general principle I stated, that source powers of any peak pathway naturally would orient the story of everything to them. And you're saying that Jai has gone up a grade.
No.
In general, well, okay, explain to me how it's not the case, because you're saying that Jai is accepting that everything can't be Jai as compared to Ji. That sounds, I could be wrong, that sounds like you're saying that Jai, because it's there, it has a developmental stage it went through that Ji doesn't or doesn't as much.
I don't think that that's in relation to the Jai. I think that's in relation to the world pushing on that. Jai users are forced to look at that by the world because it's not a thing that's intrinsic to Jai. It's a thing that's intrinsic to
This principle you're talking about, you were going to bring Nye into it, and we can go ahead and do that, but that's why it doesn't really, I don't see it scaling this way, because Nye, for example, is highest up on the SS index, but still, despite it being told from day one, more than any other power, more than Jai, that no, you can't have your way, you're going to have to curtail your natural instincts for the story's direction. So Nye suffers that the most, yet I can tell you as a Nye alpha that Nye, for most Nye users, still tries to orient existence based on what it thinks, how things go. Do you know what I mean? So you're right. I mean, Nye will be curved more on that than Vi. I acknowledge that. And
I think
Nye will be curved on that more than G. I acknowledge that. But that curvage is less than compared to the drive, using Nye, for example, as the top essay. It still just has this innate desire to make the story make sense to itself first.
Yeah, but maybe Nye's the bad one because it's Nye's directive to begin with, and it has the strongest drive underneath it. So even though it's curved at a much, like you learned that curve lesson earlier, there's a stronger drive behind it. I don't know. Anyway.
No, but Nie's higher up even still, say, than Jai or G, so it gets dinged on a lot. But Nii Mojos still, in terms of Nii Alpha, but all Nii Mojos still generally think that the quickness of Nii, its ability to connect things, that should be a given. And if you're not allowed to do it, it's wrong. And if people can't do it, Nii often thinks this, are slow. Humans who cannot Nii are slow. Because from their point of view, it seems that they are. All powers kind of think that.
But Nii users, that's kind of like I learned at a young age that not everybody gets the next thing. Like I think Nii users and Nii users, and as you're using that power and you learn at an early age that no, not every, like I think like that, but not everybody else thinks like that's the bigger principle that I'm trying to get, like that like.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but the thing is, the difference, as Ben mentioned, is not that dramatic on, say, Jai to G in the SS index as compared to the human drive to make the story in your own image. Is the story in your own image going to be curved more if your power is higher in the SS index? Yes, definitely. But from what I've seen, every mojo, every peak pathway is an overwhelming drive to validate your story. And all I was saying as a general principle that I don't think can be sidestepped is every human will have to consistently work on that. And even if you've been curved some with Jai early in one's life or throughout one's life, you'll still have to watch out for taking your story and over-validating it or validating other stories based on that meter. As a seeker, there's that will always have to be kept firmly in mind. And anything that would make you think like, oh, I've done that, Jai has gotten that. I don't believe you can ever get past that.
And sometimes even curbing it also can create like a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, like you actually think it deserves you more, but not always. But I mean that can happen with some of the higher SS index powers, like an elitism at having those kind of abilities.
True.
It's well, I mean, I get that. I get that. We all have the drive to make the story over the way we think.
Here, let me throw this at you, and maybe this will help you understand where I'm coming at. It's a lesson I learned reading Incredible Hulk. And Incredible Hulk goes on to another planet where they have the green aliens versus the red aliens. And I forget which one is enslaved, but one of them enslaves the other one. I think it's the green ones are enslaved by the reds. Incredible Hulk is green, he becomes the Green's champion, and he makes the Reds not be in power anymore. He goes back to Earth, and he thinks it's going to be good now. No. Here's why. If you don't keep this in mind, do something about it, this will always reassert itself. The Greens then dominate the Reds. So when Jai, for example, is curtailed early on, that does happen, but just know it is a very human desire to want to get back, to want to actually get recompense for one's peak pathway not being served correctly. It takes a very strong and clear seeker mind to keep reasserting to truth, not to compensate or to get recompense. It's just it's very hard initially. Just start at a blank table and give everyone a fair deal and not try to give your peak pathway more. That's just hard in general. And then if you've been curtailed throughout your life, it can be extra hard. You may learn to curtail when you're not in power. But then say Jai gets power, it'll have to really watch to not go, Jai did not have his time in the sun, now it has strength, it will get its time in the sun. It is very hard to not take more than you're owed. The only way to do that is to constantly look at peak pathways and assess it based on that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
As the thing that humans have to watch out for is peak pathway takeover. It's just something that's very hard to deal with.
Because we want energy.
I get that, Coach. I still have this thing though that where like there's a difference in the way that the directive sides of that though.
That's true, sure.
Like the Jai doesn't have. We may think we want to have the Jai time in the sun, but there's not that directiveness behind the Jai that there is with the Ji.
Right. I don't see how that in this case would be changing things, because if Jai is an adaptive tower power, which it is, the natural law is going to assess it as a tower power, not as some other kind of directive power. So the question is, Jai's not going to try and say take over, but it may take up space, or it may drag its feet, going places it doesn't want to go, and maybe it needs to go there. But it will drag its feet. Dragging its feet is not taking ground, but it is a peak pathway. All peak pathways basically have to watch out for not doing that, not actually making it go just the way they want.
So the Jai form of that is more an obstructionism sort of thing rather than a directing sort of thing. Okay, I get that. I guess the it being the not directive side of it though, it just feels to me like, and I'm biased and whatever, it just feels to me like though that the G users do try to direct that and try to project that onto everybody ought to have that more than Jai users do. It just feels that way.
I'm just to speak honestly with what you're saying here, and I'm being very calm and everything's good here, but the way it kind of sounds is that there's like a Jai victimization that you want credit for. Because
maybe we should narrow things down, because I like you're saying Ji users and Jai users. That's half of the human collective, and the other half. Can we narrow it down to Ji mojos and Jai mojos?
Does that help the Zai any?
Well, I think that the issue I'm seeing is that
I think that
what you're asking for, I agree, Ben, but I think there also needs to be addressing perhaps what Starglow is asking for, because what you said, Ben, would streamline the inquiry, but I think perhaps the inquiry needs to be looked at more closely.
Okay.
Because I feel Starglow wants something here. I'm trying to figure out what does she want, and if it can be gotten, I want to give that, but if it can't be gotten, we should figure that out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having trouble articulating what that is too. So
as a G Mojo,
as a Jai Mojo, I don't really know what that is yet.
No, I'm just trying to figure it out. So, because I don't. Is it an important distinction that the G, when it goes bad, does so in a directive way, and the Jai does so in a adaptive way? Because that's just kind of obvious and mathematical. But it seems like the way you're stating it, that you want some sort of like, I don't know, a statement of some kind on things. Like for example, here, let me just note, I know that you made this statement like 3 times. It was important that when G is being told by the world that it's not going to get its way to interpretation, it tries to push back, which makes sense because it's a pusher power.
It's a directive pusher, yeah.
Right, but the way you said it, like, I'm curious if Mitchell and Ben also sense this. I felt from your Jai as if somehow that was more wrong.
No, not wrong. That's not it.
The way you're saying, I almost feel like I agree with what you're saying. That somehow, I don't know, like I feel like some sort of transaction's happening here. I'd like to know what it is before. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Okay, it's more like an acknowledgement of it's not a victim thing, Coach. That's not what I'm trying to get at. It's not a one is better or one your directives are wrong for that, or the G users are wrong for that directive use. I think I have a desire for acknowledgement of I'm not sure what. There's a
because if it's that Jai can have a hard lot in life, that is true, but it doesn't change certain mathematical things. Like all peak pathways are challenged by their source powers, overwhelming drives. That's kind of a universal state of existence that everyone experiences. That's bigger than just Jai Mojos being aggrieved in a particular way by the world.
Yeah, that's not really what I'm trying to get at, though, Coach. I really do wish I could articulate this better. I don't.
It's an ongoing conversation, and we kind of got to a point where maybe we need to kind of all collect our thoughts a bit more. And it's running on 8 o'clock now, so I don't hold people up anymore.
Yeah.
It was
sorry.
Very good discussion. So no, this is worthwhile, but it's kind of good because I think we were feeling maybe a little uncomfortable with saying Jai is this and G is this, but you felt that you were still something wanted to have form to be said. So we'll just keep going from here. You know what I mean? It'll be ongoing. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Well, probably we may or may not ever get back to it, and it might not be so important to my job the next time. Because again, it's the piece where.
Well, it seems to me that it will come again if you have this feeling on it, because it's going to be unresolved. Your Jai feels like I can feel. I know Jai well, that you want like our G of the Naiji here to agree to your assessment on this situation, and we would like to, because we're friends and we agree things, but we'll have to understand it and actually agree with our G. We can't just agree because you.
Right, and I wish maybe I'll have a conversation with my Uther along these lines, because I just don't know how to give form to it. I don't have the structure.
But we went far here today, and we went down several avenues, so that kind of taught us a lot, and we built some dialogue here. So that's a platform. So we didn't create nothing. You know what I mean? We created that. And
that's at least good to hear, because it makes me feel like this little rabbit hole tangent that I went down was not worthless. So that at least is something.
Because your Jai has a feeling on this, and so. This kind of resonance will come in other times as well, so it's good to kind of just pull it up and kind of figure out what it is that we're doing. But so I hope this helps some. But I can't always get to the bottom of everything in one session.
I don't know. It's the formless thing that's.
Fair enough. But if you had any more thoughts of it, we could definitely revisit that in the forums and whatnot as well. Plus, you'll be coming out here soon, so we can have like more just in-depth conversations.
Oh yeah, that's yeah. We can if we want to say goodbye live. Yeah. I'll email Jolene with that. I don't yet have a specific time. So yeah.
Darling just came home.
Hey,
All right. Well, we ran a half hour over, so I don't want to go any more. But that was a good talk, and I don't want to cut it off. Okay, everyone. Thank you very, very much, and I'll see you guys on Sunday.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye.